Okay, hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba. It's time for the Armist Inquisition yet again, episode 248 on Monday, the 12th of September. Little double header for you here. And I'm Amish Phil, and I'm here with Matt Raymer from ContentSafe. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great, Phil.
Good, it's nice to see you again. Do you like my titles and my graphics? I tell you, I'm getting good at this OBS stuff, you know?
It looks fantastic.
Yeah, I've only really been taking it seriously like since January or February. I invested and upgraded in a new machine, new PC, because hardware was really holding me back with what I wanted to do with OBS, and I just had this shitty like $500 laptop, and you could fry an egg on it by the time we'd finished the live stream. It was just melting to pieces, and it has since died.
Oh man!
Yeah. So I invested in this like super duper custom built PC, and it's just given me this freedom to try and, you know, play with graphics and try and be more creative with the video aspect and take it more seriously, because we are audio at the end of the day. But video's there, why not use it if you can, you know?
Yeah, it gives you a whole other universe and what you can do. I've started with OBS about 2 years ago, I think it was, and I never turned back. In fact, it's so funny that I'll have like a client contact me, and he gets my video and is like, "Whoa, is this a news program? Is this a television show?" Like, no, it's just OBS.
It's so liberating, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, the way, I mean, there are drawbacks to this sort of technological expansion that we're living through over from the sort of the internet age, the silicon age that we're embarking on. But there is a certain level of liberation and a democratization when it comes to content creation, isn't there? Because the barriers to entry have dropped so much in the last 10 to 15 years.
Well, you know, technology itself, I'm a follower of the French philosopher Jacques Ellul, who's from 20th century philosopher, talked about technology, and it was a bit of a futurologist for his time, even though he didn't really like being called a futurologist. And his opinion was that technology always led to more problems than it led to solutions. But I think that a lot of that was embedded in his deep distrust of centralized authority. And what you get with the internet we have now is much more decentralized, at least for now.
Yeah, as long as they allow it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we hear sort of rumorings about some of the big social media networks wanting sort of inviting regulation. We can't be held responsible for this. We need the government to come and set the rules for us and sort of regulate us in a certain way, and that makes me pretty nervous. I like the Wild West style internet that we used to have.
Absolutely, and I think that we need to keep innovating. There are technologies out there that allow us some degree of freedom from centralized platforms, and those platforms, or sometimes they're open source technologies that they're not even, you know, belonging necessarily to anyone in particular.
Right, like OBS.
Yeah, right, exactly. That type of technology, we need to be familiar with it, and we need to utilize it so that we can keep ourselves free from centralized control of the internet.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a technological guy, so as soon as someone says blockchain and decentralized, I don't understand it. I mean, what examples when you say decentralized technologies? What sort of examples are we talking about?
The way that the internet works itself is decentralized. So whenever we talk to one another, that signal does not pass through one single point of control. It can travel through a variety of means to get between me and you. In internet terminology, it passes through a network of routers.
Right.
And that is inherently decentralized. Built into the internet technology is decentralization because it was designed, at least this is what they tell us, it was designed to be able to handle a nuclear war. Well, if you had one centralized hub that they had to knock out and then your entire network didn't work anymore, oh, that's not good. That's bad. So one more optimistic view of the future is that there's no way to avoid decentralization because you make your system fragile if you centralize it.
Right, so it's almost like an evolution, like an evolutionary mechanism of self-preservation in that respect.
Right, and you know, some schools of evolutionary theory are not really as centralized or dependent on one point of development. So, for instance, if you take Darwin's view of evolution, it's based on survival of the fittest. But there are other schools of evolution that are communitarian by their very nature, and they say that you can't really have a single survival of the fittest model for how things would develop. It has to be done in community, and communities distribute it.
Right. Yeah, and there's sort of, I guess, Dawkins called it the selfish gene in this respect. I hear what you're saying, that the survival of the fittest taken to its root, to its core, is almost like it is like a selfish act. It's if we took that philosophy to its extreme, you would end up with, I was going to say, like a group of controllers who control the world and fuck everyone else over. Whoa, how did that happen?
And you know, that's why some and I don't really take a side in this discussion, but some would say that Darwin was more justifying his peers and their behavior than he was actually doing scientific research.
Yeah.
And that there were others, like I believe it was Wallace, if I'm not mistaken, that took a more communitarian approach, and he would have disagreed with that, you know, centrality of survival of the fittest being the mechanism. But if you're a bunch of, you know, control freaks, then you would say that the world has to work that way.
Well, the problem we have is that the way our system is geared and the way we value success, it seems to be predisposed to people lacking empathy. People who will do anything, they will trod on anyone to climb up that greasy pole. People who have no, you know, it's sort of set up to fail in that respect, or to reward bad behaviour or immoral behaviour. And I don't see how we get out of that without a huge change.
Well, the idea of hierarchy, I don't think necessarily has to be malevolent.
No, if it's based on competence.
Right. And I think if you look at the people we're talking about, they live in a hierarchy. It's just a smaller subset of humanity. Because otherwise they couldn't do what they're doing. They have to have a competency hierarchy within their people. And I don't look at those types of people as being a single entity, by the way. I look at them as being a confederation of people who have similar interests or goals.
Yes. Because one of the weapons that's used against people like me who think in this certain conspiratorial way is they think that we think that there is some sort of grand hierarchy pyramid with the lizard at the top, you know, and all this and this lot. Yeah. Whereas I think we're maybe more on the same page, that this is more about mutual benefit and the sort of mutual interests overlapping between different groups can be completely disconnected groups. You know, it could be pharmaceutical industry one day, it could be automotive industry, it could be social media giants, but there are certain areas where mutual interests cross, and that benefits this wider group. You know, rather than the sort of the common trope of a smoke-filled room full of guys making all the decisions for the rest of us.
And I do think that there are some smoke-filled rooms out there.
Oh yeah,
but
like Davos.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. But we need to remember that these people they might work in lockstep, to use one of their own terms, on occasion, but I do think they're in competition with one another otherwise. And that's actually to our benefit that they're in competition. It means that there can be factions within them that are more sympathetic to us. Like, I think what you see in American politics right now could, I'm not going to say this in absolute terms because they didn't give me an invitation to the meetings. But it, to my observation, it sometimes looks like you have these two factions that want to have the top dog position in that country, and they're fighting with one another, and they will use the masses however they want. You know, they can take a small disenfranchised group of people and radicalize them into a weapon. And I think it happens on all sides within that group of power brokers.
Right, yeah.
And it's like I tell people, it really doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter exactly how it works. What matters is that we be aware that we need to be careful and be self-sufficient and build our own communities.
Yeah, there's a saying in the UK, it doesn't matter who you vote for, the government always gets in. And I wonder how much of it is just a dog and pony show, you know.
I think a lot of it is. I've seen other governments that clearly the person that's at the top is not really the one that's running it. Going back
Exhibit A, Brandon.
Exactly. Clearly not him. Though I do think that they might let a person who's with their group play out according to the script that they write, and they just get corrected as they, no, you're too far off. You need to go this way, because you will see people do radical changes. Now, going back to Elihu again, Elihu said that in the 20th century, and even before then, that the politicians didn't run anything. He was saying this about Europe in 1950. He said, no, politicians don't run anything in Europe. The bureaucrats do.
Right, and they're the constant, you see. We forget politicians come and go. They have 4-year terms or 5-year terms, and they're always, that's their job, is to look ahead to the next election cycle and win as many or more votes as they did the previous term. But it's, I mean, people use the term deep state, which again is something that's used as a cudgel to beat people who think outside the box on this. But bureaucracy is a better, a more sort of tame way of putting it. That there are, we call it the civil service in the UK. People who are they're lifers. They get in there in the 20s or 30s and work their way up, and they're the kind of the machinery, the people who keep the machine going, regardless of what's happening in the political sphere.
The American constitutional attorney Robert Barnes calls them the managerial class.
Wow, yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And in his, because he's kind of an interesting viewpoint from that guy. I really like his viewpoint, but just a caveat for anyone listening. I do meta-analysis. I don't really sign on to any particular viewpoint because I think it's risky. I don't think I have enough Obviously, I don't have a multi-trillion-dollar intelligence agency to inform me about anything. So I have to go across the spectrum of ideas. But Barnes says that for people who want to maintain freedom and liberty in their life, that they have to ally with elite entities to get that. That's his perspective. And I've met other people who feel the same way, that they'd say there's no getting rid of that class of people. You have to ally with them.
Yeah, I mean, they serve an important function in the running of the state. If you want to live in a state that has certain benefits, whether it be, we all have different philosophies over how big government should be, how much we need, where you've got, the anarchists on one end of the spectrum saying everything should be voluntary and we don't need public schools or whatnot or whatever. I mean, the UK is fairly socialist country. We have socialised healthcare and free school. I say free. Nothing is free. The government doesn't have any money. But you get the picture. You're entitled. Your kids are entitled to a place at school. I mean, you're in the Philippines. What's it like in the Philippines as far as like
everybody has to pay their own way
for everything?
For everything. I remember public schooling is not a right here. You have to pay for it. So if you can't afford it, you don't get it. The other aspect about here is I remember another expat, because I don't normally associate with expats. I'm normally around Filipinos. That's by choice. I have this thing about Westerners that come here. They're usually not the best cut of people. But this one Westerner that I made friends with about 20 years ago, he was great guy. But we were talking about one of the presidents about 10 years ago that she was saying, if we don't improve the tax collection in the country, we're going to have to start cutting back on government services. And he's like, what do you mean? The lines at the post office are going to get longer? What exactly does that mean? So, in fact, to go another step further, if you want a good road in this country, they're all toll roads. So you're not paying for them with taxes. You're paying for them with tolls. So going from where I live to Manila costs you $30 in toll fees one way.
Right.
So really I often think of it not so much as a democracy, so much as so what is it my British friend calls it? It's not an oligarchy. It's kind of an oligarchy of warlords.
Right.
And for the most part, they do all their warlordish sort of things that you would imagine, but they're cooperative enough that they let roads get built and they all share in the money, and only occasionally do they go to war with one another.
Wow. And are these is that like a geographical?
Yes, it is. They're all centered around certain provinces, and you can identify whoever's president, that province is going to bloom wonderfully because they're going to funnel money to their family, friends, and clan members. And that place is going to just explode in productivity for the 6 years that guy's or woman is in office.
Wow. It's a completely different way of life. And where, I'm as guilty as anyone of being an ignorant Westerner who doesn't travel enough and doesn't pay attention to how other people live and stuff. So it's interesting.
If you came to visit, you wouldn't, it would look like one country.
Yeah.
But if you live here long enough, and I just happen to be that my wife's family's in the police and the military, and we know people at the higher levels of society, you start to understand what's going on that you don't see on the surface.
So is it actually officially a democracy? Do you have elections
Yes,
and that?
officially we have elections, and all of that. It's all of the boxes are checked as far as the democracy is concerned. But in reality, it's not really that much about democracy. They buy votes. There are some people who get upset every now and then, like with the previous president and even the current president, that their opponents are very angry because they say it's their turn to be president. Right. Yeah. So they're going to hype up all the rhetoric against whoever's in office that if it's not them. And I do see a divide. You have to be careful because at some level, every single one of them is a globalist. But some of them are more local sympathetic. Like the previous president, he's from the southernmost island, and he was correct in that the southernmost island, that's the massive big one, not a tiny little one, that it had been neglected for almost the whole history of the country. And he was the first president to come from that region. So that region got tons and tons and tons of money while he was in office. Right. And the ones who are really have a lot of foreign assets, which are mostly what you would call from the Chinoy class, the Chinese Filipino class, those guys, they have a lot of global interests. So they're more interested in, things going on outside. They at least make some, they're a lot more sympathetic to globalizing the country and listening to the WHO or listening to the UN than the previous president was. But it really does come down to money. So whenever the recent event that maybe some people have encountered, this recent event in the last few years where people were restricted in movement and all of that, all of that type of thing, he would have at least hypothetically opposed at the beginning of his term. But whenever the money started to flow in, he was like completely on board with the whole idea. So
that was, a couple of questions to raise from that. Does most of the foreign investment come from China? And is the Philippines falling under the sphere of like the Belt and Road Initiative?
You would have to say we're under the Belt and Road Initiative, but we can be a problematic country. I will say one thing that I'm very proud of my Filipino friends is that they are very nationalistic, and the leadership is very treacherous with foreign entities. So they don't like having strings attached.
Right. So, I mean, generally, it's either IMF loans with strings, or it's Chinese Belt and Road loans with strings.
But take Ferdinand Marcos, for instance. One of the reasons that, this is my opinion, but I think I could back it up with evidence. One of the reasons he left was because he reneged on all the loans.
Wow. So was that like a default?
Yeah, he defaulted.
Wow.
And they punished him. They took him out of office. They put someone more sympathetic to the IMF in office. And, but they put him in office to begin with.
How did that sort of play out on the ground? Because it's, again, in Western Europe, it's unheard of for a country to go into default. We've heard, Greece came close recently, and Italy always seems to be on a knife edge. What was it like there, living through it? Was it a big deal?
20 years being kicked in the teeth.
Really?
They punish you for it. And what happened during that time was everybody went abroad. The biggest earner for the government is foreign workers, not taxes. So I think our GDP is like 70-80% remittances.
Wow. Which
the UN has been warning them for decades that they need to increase tax collection and pull back on these remittance dependency. Yeah. But I don't know about now. But say 20 years ago, there were 100,000 new foreign workers per month.
And where are they coming from?
Oh, they just come from well, this is like going out, okay, not coming in.
Oh,
so,
right, going out.
Yeah, so you've got lots of Filipinos there in Britain.
Yeah, like a lot of nurses, healthcare industry. It's kind of it's something I don't agree with. It's kind of fucked up, really. Rather than taking like an 18-year-old boy, lad or girl, and training them to be a nurse or a doctor and investing in them and sending them through university and higher education, and then, it's an expensive process to take an 18-year-old chap and mold him into a doctor. And so rather than doing that, we go to the Far East, to the Philippines, to Thailand, to India. We let them spend all the money training their guys and girls, and then we poach them for the National Health Service.
It's called a brain drain. And
yes.
It's bad for the Philippines just as it's bad for Britain.
Yeah, it's so short-termism.
Well, my real objection, I mean, of course, I came from another country and I came here. Of course, though, I live off Western economies. That's I don't live off the local economy. The thing I object to is the lack of like the nurses that are trained here aren't here, so the locals don't benefit from that training. You might benefit in terms of that person goes abroad, they send back money, but that hasn't been all wonderful because a lot of these people leave families behind, and there's a lot of resentment amongst children of these foreign workers that their parents were never around.
Really? Like, this is an angle we never hear about. We don't think about people that get left behind. Yeah. I mean, do most people return? Do they do like 5-year stints to make a big chunk of money and then come back? Or
usually it's 20-year stints or more. And I think, I don't know what the exact ratio of people who stay abroad and people who come back is, but I do know that for for people who went to the U.S., it's fairly high that they would go until they're 65 and they would collect their Social Security money and they come back to retire here. Yeah. Yeah. Because the cost of living is lower.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, the other issue we have to sort of support this way of operating in the West is our below replacement birth rate. We're not having enough babies over here in the West. And so that's sometimes used as, I'm not saying I condone this, but that's sometimes used as an excuse that we need lots of immigration to keep our numbers up and pay our pensions because, the state pension is a joke here. People think they're putting money away for the future, and it's not. It's your kids and your grandkids who are going to be paying your pension,
Right. So, I don't rely on the Social Security money that they promised me. I wrote that off years ago.
Yeah, it's a promise, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a promise, but my dad was, I guess you could say, an old school conspiracy theorist.
Really?
Yeah. He was, he died about 10 years ago, but he was up there. I was the last kid in the family. So I grew up, him telling me, like, the bankers, they control the world.
Wow.
And, yeah. This was before, any of this stuff. I would say that was 1984, 1985 that he was telling me this stuff. And I was a geeky little kid, computers, physics, chemistry. And I was like, Dad, I don't think that's possible.
Here you go, son, read this. It gives you a copy of Behold a Pale Horse or something.
Well, at that time, Cooper hadn't written yet.
No, 84.
Right.
Christ.
He was reading anti-establishment newspapers in the 1980s. Just a guy in the Midwest, didn't finish high school, My dad was a pretty bright guy. He was self-taught. And my whole family has a vein of just figuring stuff out. My grandfather was, I don't know if you're familiar with the term. It may be a uniquely American term, a sawyer.
Like Tom Sawyer?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, like Tom Sawyer. A sawyer was a person whose job was to find trees and then figure out what boards could be cut out of the trees.
Right. Dimensionally, what size boards?
Right.
Crikey.
Right. So he would go and buy up like logs from people's forests, bring them back to the sawmill, and then flip it, right? Make money off finding the logs for the sawmill. And he also had great opportunities to buy land. So if he found a nice piece of land, he would buy it. And that's why I ended up growing up on a farm, because it was an inheritance from my grandfather.
Wow. So did you have was it like a working farm that, you grew, or was it just, I'll say like a
hobby farm. It was a hobby farm. Yeah, because my dad had a full-time job. He worked as in management for a heavy equipment company, which, again, he's self-taught. He went in as a diesel mechanic, and after a few years, he got promoted up into the management class of the company. And he just did, like before I was born, they would do dairy cows and beef cows and pigs. But after I was born, they cut back and they did only beef cows. They raised tobacco, and they did, your typical chickens. I think we had some turkeys for a while, and we were self-sufficient.
Right.
My mom would raise this garden, and we had what we called a root cellar. And in the root cellar were all of these canned vegetables. So whenever there was a blizzard that came through in 1975, I think it was a humongous blizzard in the Midwest. And I kid you not, the snow drifts were at the tops of the telephone poles.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, and we didn't have a worry in the world. We had a wood stove. We had food in the root cellar. We had chickens up in the barn, fresh eggs. We were like, okay, well, it's going to take 2 weeks for the roads to be cleared, but we won't go hungry.
This is so alien to us now. These are things and skills that we've lost. And I say it often on our podcast, but our society is sort of on a knife edge. It's hanging on a thread. And, if you store up some canned food and water and whatnot, you get called a prepper and a bit of a lunatic because you think, but I mean, it's just it's so basic. Like, you got to be able to meet your needs.
That's right. For me, until I started forming companies, I was pretty much freelance, and I learned pretty quick, man, you better buy some groceries, keep a couple months of groceries, because you don't know when you're going to get paid.
Right. Yeah. Well, necessity, you see, necessity is the mother of invention. And
it's not prepping. I mean, it is prepping in a sense, but it's not prepping in for doomsday. It's just practical prepping. I want to be able to eat while the paychecks are coming to arrive. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is becoming more of a real consideration, because they're talking about energy blackouts and stuff in Europe now with the whole gas oil situation. And
there is a guy I follow in Sweden. He has a channel called Sanity for Sweden. And he was just commenting because he lives out in the backwoods of Sweden. And he was saying that his neighbor was now selling truckloads of firewood to people in Stockholm.
Yeah.
Because they're anticipating blackouts.
Do you know, it's so ironic, isn't it? Because a lot of the situation we're in is being pushed by this green agenda, the decarbonisation agenda 2030 and net zero by 2050 and whatnot. And I follow Jordan Peterson's point of view in this regard, that if you want to limit carbon emissions, you need to make people wealthier. When people don't have gas to heat their homes or food, they will burn anything to keep warm. And I think he absolutely nails it. investment in the developing world to help people go from burning wood to burning coal to burning gas and working the way up like that. You know, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When it comes to energy, you know, it's a luxury to give a shit about the environment. We all do. We all think we all want a nice planet to live on. But when it comes to the crunch and you've no heat and it's winter, those concerns have to go on the back burner. No pun intended, because you know, survival is at the top of the pyramid. You know.
Yeah, and all of these, at least for a country like Sweden, they, strangely enough, had programs for training people to survive invasion by the Soviets, and those programs are still active.
Wow.
So they actually had government subsidized prepping.
Like basic survival skills and.
Oh yeah, counter military stuff, stocking up foods, But I've actually got this kind of, I guess, overly idealistic view of the Swedes. I was able to go there a few years ago to teach a class, and I was just so impressed at Swedish society. Just amazing, and to talk to them, such professional people. Yeah. I don't think that I've ran across many places like that. I just felt at home whenever I was there. I mean, even here, even though I have family and friends here, I felt more at home in Sweden than I did here. It's strange. It's really strange.
Wow. It's funny. I just saw an article this morning. I only saw the headline, but the headline was saying that Sweden is at risk of a far-right political party gaining power.
Not really. There's a movement there, but it's only going to get about 20 to 30% of the vote. They may be able to get a seat in their parliament, but they're not going to be taking over. And, I actually, whenever I went there, I worked for the Swedish government for a week, and they were all like, they thought maybe I was a plant or something, because it's weird, because the guy, my handler, whenever the last day, he said, "I just want you to know we love the EU and we're very grateful." I'm like, why in the world are you saying this to me?
Really?
Yeah,
they
really.
thought you were a plant from Brussels.
Yes, exactly. And it's weird. Every place in Europe that I went to for that company, it was, that was Canada. That there was I did a thing for the UN in Canada, and my handler there was like, we really love the United Nations, and I guess I have that vibe.
Yeah, it's like, bro, chill. I'm just subcontracting here. Leave me alone. Just here to make a few quid. Gosh,
exactly. But let me tell you what. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that throws a light on the fact that they've probably experienced this before. They've probably experienced people coming in from the UN, whatever organisation, and they've been told by the managerial class, look, this guy's coming, make a good impression, make sure the office is tidy and all this lot, and make sure you praise the EU or the UN or whatnot.
Yeah, it is bizarre. It's really bizarre.
So going back to Sweden. Sorry, Matt. Sorry, go on.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the talking points that we hear in the UK about Sweden is the immigration from the Middle East seems to have gone really high, and I'm wondering if this uptick in what they're calling far right political is a reaction.
Directly correlated. And, I have an opinion about that. I don't have a problem with migrants. I do think that there are two problems fundamentally, though. One is, if you're going to have migrants, they need to observe the laws and culture of the people of the people they're coming to, right? So if you're going to migrate to Britain, you need to respect British laws and you need to respect British culture. That seems like a no-brainer to me. And what has caused all of this friction is the refusal to enforce Swedish law on some of these migrants.
Right.
that's why because the Swedes are very obedient people. They love their country. They obey their laws. They pay their taxes, and they get, millions of people coming in that often, I wouldn't put a ratio on this, but it's noticeable to them. I'm not saying that every single migrant disobeys.
No, of course not.
Right. It's just enough that it pisses people off. Well, it would be relatively easy, I would think, for a state that's been enforcing its own laws on its own people for centuries to do the same for migrants.
Yeah, and this is where the discontent comes from. And
it almost seems to me to be engineered discontent.
Well, yeah, it could be engineered. It could be just political opportunism.
Or incompetence.
Incompetence is always in the mix when it comes to government and the state. Christ.
But whenever, for me, my saying recently is whether it's instigated, whether it's opportunism, or whether it's incompetence, it doesn't really matter because it's the same outcome.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I think people have more sympathy when they see migration being used for the benefit of the whole. So, like, if you have a particular skill shortage, maybe we don't have enough software engineers. We need X amount of software engineers in the economy, and we just don't have them. So, and it's going to take too long to train them.
See, that's why people try to say it's racism or xenophobia. I really don't think that that's the case. I think that it's this lack of enforcement of law that causes it. And if you wanted to have this all go away in a couple years, it would all go away. Just enforce your laws. Don't treat the migrant any differently than you would a native.
Yeah.
Make them go through a program on behavior. Like, this is what we expect. If you're going to stay, you got to follow the rules. And
you see, we're coming from an EU perspective. We've left the EU now, but before that, it was open door essentially to the EU. Mm-hmm. And so, because this migration issue has been bubbling up in the UK, because it puts pressure on public services and school places and whatnot, we were having to what we were having to do is reject immigration applications from outside of the EU because we have this open door policy within the EU. And it was almost racist. We were rejecting doctors from India, nurses from Thailand, scientists from Africa, anywhere, because we had to let Polish joiners and, Bulgarian bricklayers in.
Right.
It's just, it made no sense whatsoever. I was a Brexiteer. I voted for Brexit, and it was a tough decision because, there were all these sort of doomsday predictions about the economic fallout that would occur. And I was still thinking about it. I was still running it through my head as I went into the ballot box. I knew what the right decision was, but I knew that there would be pain associated with it.
Right.
And it's still a question that's bubbling up. There's still people who want to go back. They want to change and re-enter the EU.
But what are you going to go back to? Because it really does look like the EU's falling apart.
Yeah.
You've got the Italians, give it another year. They've got this new prime minister coming in that looks like she's going to go do what Salvini did. And maybe even stronger than Salvini, because, as we say, the recent events of the last 3 years have made the Italians even more angry at their central government.
In what respect? What was it about
they were ground zero for lockdowns.
Right, yeah, they were the sort of test case in Europe.
Yeah, and it really pissed off the Italians. They're very angry.
It was strange how that all happened in Northern Italy, sorry.
Well, one theory I heard about that, which I don't even know what I think about this impossible interpretation, that was the garment center for Italy, right?
Yeah, I've heard this.
And you had all of these people growing ill in a particular area that was full of Chinese influence. And that's really strange. That's very strange. But that's why some people, like the terrain theory guys, would say, no, it just shows you that the toxins of the garment industry makes people sick.
Yeah. I've not gone down the rabbit hole on terrain theory. My instinct, from what I do know about the idea, is that I'm not buying it. But I'm not an expert on anything. And
well, I would say it's probably a combination of what we would traditionally call germ theory, and there are aspects of terrain theory that make sense. Like, for instance, polio. The poster boy for polio in the United States was FDR, the president, Roosevelt.
Mm.
But you realize he didn't have polio.
That was a thing, was it? That was a PR thing that he had polio.
Yeah, they had polio. He didn't have polio. You can check. What happened was he went swimming in a lake or a stream that had toxic effluent in it, and he developed a neurosis. Not neurosis, but it damaged his nervous system. That's what made him paralyzed, not polio.
Wow. Do you know, it just makes you wonder how much of history is a lie. I mean, we did an hour on this last night, and you just don't know what to believe.
No, you don't. Like, for me, I'm curious about the idea of ancient civilizations. I haven't made a commitment on any of them yet. What I told an acquaintance of mine I recently met that was very strong on Tartaria, mud floods, and what I told her was, I'm more interested in collecting the data that people claim supports the idea, and then validating that data, because I think that there probably were ancient civilizations before ours that we don't even know. We just don't even know who built whatever they built. For instance, in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, who built that?
And it's not the only one. They keep finding them. There's those Karahan Tepe. The Turkish authorities came out a few months ago and said, there's dozens of these sites. They keep popping up, and they're buried. Right. And I think they've excavated maybe 5 or 10% of Göbekli Tepe in the last 2 decades. It's it really is a mystery. I mean, I'm a big fan of like Graham Hancock and his books and other authors in that sort of area. So I'm very sympathetic to the sort of lost civilization hypothesis. And it kind of makes sense when you think how long modern humans have been around for. It keeps getting pegged back, but we're talking 300,000 years at a minimum now. And you think, and we only got writing from cuneiform in Sumer, 3000 BC. What were we doing?
Well, if you look at, I mean, human remains are hard to preserve. I would be suspicious if we haven't been around longer than that.
We had, sorry, go on.
Yeah. I think that we may have been around a lot longer than that.
You want to, we did a show with Mario Buildreps, who's...
I don't know them.
No, well, it was a bit of a score for us because I think we might have been the first podcast he did. And it's been on Grimerica. Darren and Graham, I sent Graham the link because I'm a huge Grimerica fan. I listen to him all the time.
Yeah, I just talked to him the other day.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And they've been on our show. And so I know what they like. I know the subjects they cover. And I sent Graham a message with a link to this guy and said, you got to check this out. This is right up your alley when it comes to lost civilization. And he's been doing, like you mentioned about meta-analysis, he's been looking at ancient sites and correlating their alignments to positions of the North Pole and a migration of the North Pole. And there's so much detail in it, and it's maths at the end of the day. The numbers don't lie, as Randall Carlson says. And he's the same. He's like, which site did he say? I can't remember which site he mentioned, but he said this was built 100,000 years ago. I'm like, whoa, you're blowing my mind, man. It's like,
have you heard about the axis flip hypothesis?
This isn't Charles Hapgood, is it? Not the crustal displacement theory. This is is this an electromagnetic pole flip.
It's actually a physical pole shift.
Shit.
And it's not really Hancock's theory, because Hancock's theory had a lot of flaws with it. And I think his key was crustal displacement, and that's not part of the modern approach to the pole flipping.
Right.
It's an interaction between the magnetic pole and the external galactic superwave, which is part of it. And it does appear that there is evidence that the physical poles have been at different places at different times in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Mario's saying, but sort of not flipping into another hemisphere. He's showing a migration like the North Pole was in Greenland, 100,000 years ago. Whatever.
Of course, like I said, I'm not really taking any one position. I'm just observing how they're interpreting it. And there's a fellow by the name of Ben Davidson. Have you heard of him?
Ben Davidson? No, I don't think I have.
You might check his channel out on YouTube. It's called Suspicious Observers.
Oh, gosh, yes. Yes, I know. The solar flare guy.
Yeah, he has, in the last 4 years, been advocating a model of an actual flip. And it looks like, at least for me, because I got one of my degrees in physics, and it looks to me that he has some legitimacy in what he's saying. The problem with flipping in the past was you would look at how we imagined the core and the mantle being formed, and we would say, no, it's not really possible. There's no way for you to get a radical flip in a short period of time. But recent evidence of how the core and the mantle are structured lends itself to a flip. So we would think of the core and the mantle as being somehow homogeneous, and it's not. It's not homogeneous. So now we have a mechanism by which you could actually have some sort of electromagnetic force on the Earth that would cause it to flip 90 degrees.
90 degrees. So not a total flip. Wow.
Yeah. And which would produce a massive tsunami. Right?
I mean, what's the scale? What's the time scale of the flip? Is he
12,000 years.
12,000 years. And
we're at the edge. According to his calculations, we're at the edge of that flip.
Wow. I wonder if this plays into the long count, the precession of the equinox, 25,000 year cycle,
Well, he looks at well-established in paleontology. There's like a series of 6 or 8 major catastrophes, global scale catastrophes, and he maps them out, and they fall like lockstep: 12,000, 24,000, 36,000, 48,000. And they might be off 1,000 years here or there, but he said, you know what, these numbers you can't really say for sure anyway.
And when was the Younger Dryas, the last massive climate event? 12,000 years ago. Yeah, that's a scary thought.
Yeah,
we better get prepping.
Well, if it's true, there are a few safe zones in the world, but if you're in a low-lying area, man, you're fish food. Yeah, you're fish food.
Do you know, I've got a soft spot for these terrible disaster movies that came out in the 2000s, like, what is it called? Deep Impact and The Day After Tomorrow and 2012 and whatnot. I don't know why. There's something that I enjoy about civilization getting destroyed. I must be a closet nihilist.
What was the one about with Aerosmith in it?
Aerosmith. Yeah, the Bruce Willis one. Armageddon.
Yeah, Armageddon. Right.
I think that was late 90s. I think so. Is that about 99?
Yeah, I think it was 98, 99, something like that.
Yeah, a meteor's going to hit Earth. We need to send the oil company up there to save us.
The only ones who know how to save us. Yeah.
It's so preposterous. Yeah, I don't know.
That's Hollywood for you, preposterous.
Oh, well, I mean, it just seems to be getting more and more ridiculous, Hollywood. I'm pretty much disconnected. I don't really watch any TV, and there's rarely a film that comes out that I am attracted to, you know?
I'm the same. In fact, I had my first taste of this when I first moved here in the 90s. And I took 4 years off from media because this was like at the very beginning of the internet. Okay.
Right.
So from like 96 until 99, I didn't have a television. And
they were the happiest days of my life.
Well, it was interesting because I had a computer and I had limited access to the internet, but I had a computer so I could play games. And in fact, we didn't really get into YouTube until the late 2000s because I was more like I started out listening to audio stuff.
Yeah.
And then I said, if I get into video, I'll never leave. I'll be sucked in. And sure enough, I'm sucked in. I haven't left since.
There's just so much great stuff on these video platforms that knocks spots off what is being pumped out by Disney. Like I was telling my co-host Ben, this idiot who usually sits next to me, he's watching She-Hulk. Marvel's She-Hulk. I mean, I watched
heard it was horrible.
I'm not going to waste any time on it. But the funny thing is they released some viewing figures, and the premiere of She-Hulk, I think 1.8 million people watched it. And there's a YouTuber called The Critical Drinker. He's Scottish.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's a reviewer, and he just slams shit that comes out of Disney and whatnot. And his video on how to fix She-Hulk had nearly twice as many views as the She-Hulk premiere did. And I'm like, that just says it all to me.
It does. It does, absolutely. Whenever you can listen to a political commentator and he gets more views in a day or in an hour than CNN gets all day, you know that traditional media is dead. And I've been saying, it's funny. Before I got into YouTube, I was listening to this podcast in the late 2000s, and they interviewed this guy, and he was talking about the future of media. And he said, in just a few years, I can tell you what's coming, and it's going to just absolutely destroy corporate media. It's going to obliterate it. And that's what we're experiencing now, is the death of corporate media. I think corporate media is going to come back, not as centralized nighttime broadcasts, though. I think that what's forming up is basically freelance media personalities that get put on contract to speak according to a certain script.
Wow. Yeah, because it's interesting. We've had this fragmentation with the streaming services where Netflix had been dominant. They'd had a dominant position for a number of years, and then all of a sudden we get Paramount Plus.
And I think that's temporary. I don't think that you're going to see these big, massive companies are going to be able to survive. What you're going to see is people investing in independent creators under contract to produce different types of material. And that's why, we need to be wary. If you're one of these people who is worried about media manipulation of society, it's not over. It's going to be distributed. Just like we're hoping to be distributed to maintain some sense of freedom, they're going to distribute to maintain some sense of control.
Yeah, and influence.
Yes.
Yeah. You've just got to judge each, in that scenario, you've got to judge each piece of content or each creator by its own merits. And
I'd rather have that than I would corporate controlled media.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Because, I don't really want to get into all the woke stuff, but it becomes so politically motivated as well, and the content suffers for it. Like I'm watching this Ring of Power thing. This adaptation.
How's that going?
It's fucking terrible, man. It's terrible, but it's almost so bad it's funny. And so I'm sort of gritting my teeth. I think I'm probably done with it. I've watched 3, and it's like, no more.
Were you ever a Star Trek person?
Yes. What have they done to it?
Have you seen? Yeah, the corporate stuff is horrible. But have you seen the independent creator stuff that have made old school Star Trek stuff?
Do you know what? I haven't.
You should look. Some of it is okay. Some of it's okay. They're trying to capture the original TV show feeling.
Yeah, the ethos, because I mean, my other half, she watched Star Trek Discovery, and I was just in the same room, just looking over my book every now and again. I was like, this is not Star Trek. Like swearing, bad language, and violence, and you know.
I made it through the first season of Discovery before I said, "Wow, this is terrible. I'm not going to watch anymore."
It's no different from any other space soap opera now. It's missing that sort of the Star Trek TNG and whatnot.
You want a good space opera? The Expanse.
Oh right.
That is premium stuff. That is really, really, really good stuff.
Yeah.
My son, he's getting a degree in computer engineering. Excuse me, in chemical engineering. And as a hobby, he's picked up developing role-playing games. So he cooperates with people and builds these gaming systems with all the rules and all the mythology and all this stuff. It's really super complicated. I mean, I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, but he's doing stuff that's next level sort of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. And he introduced me to The Expanse, and he's like, "Dad, you're going to love this. This is fantastic." He said the way they did the show was they had a role-playing game, and they actually kept a recording of the game and how the game played out. And they wrote scripts for books and TV off of the game they played.
Wow.
Yeah, totally cool. Totally cool. And a very good story.
Yeah, people want depth in the storytelling, and this is why the Disneys and whatnot, it's just so shallow and superficial, and it's dumbed down in some sense.
This is a gritty, mostly realistic take on future space travel. Right. It's at least, I won't give away too much. I don't want to be a spoiler, but at least whenever you get in the first season, you've got a mystery that needs to be solved, which is always the way it goes, right? Opening season, you've got a mystery that needs to be solved, but you've also got to learn all these different players on Earth, Mars, and the belt.
The asteroid belt?
Yes, because the asteroid belt is populated with people they call belters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they mine the belt, and they get screwed by Mars and Earth. Mars declared independence from Earth.
Wow.
And it's really a fascinating story. I think the way that they ended the TV show, to me, was a little bit not too realistic, but the rest of the show was perfect. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I love shows that have this sort of political machination, Machiavellian characters. That's why I loved Game of Thrones when it first came out, and those first sort of 4 seasons, there was so much depth in the storytelling and the writing and the characters and the character development. It was a masterpiece. And then it just fell to pieces when they got ahead of the books and they didn't have the source material to draw on.
My kids were the ones that were obsessed with Game of Thrones. And they said, "Dad, you should watch this." You're like, no, I don't want to watch that. So I never really got into it. What I got into was Babylon 5 back in the 90s.
Right.
Did you ever watch
No,
Babylon
I never
5?
did. It passed me by, that one.
This is the greatest space opera ever made.
Wow, that's a hell of a statement.
It's cheesy because it has very little CGI in it. Everybody's in latex suits. But in terms of just Straczynski was the name of the writer. In terms of just the story and the intricacy, I just can't. It's the best one ever. I think the only one that would have competed with it, if it had lasted, would have been
Farscape. Firefly.
Yeah.
Josh Whedon.
Right, because Firefly had the potential of being the best space opera ever.
Yeah, and it got cancelled after 2 seasons or something, didn't it?
I think it was touching too close to the third rail.
Really? Oh, that's intrigued me even more. I want to go back and watch it now.
Watch it and think about, and watch the movie that closed it.
I think I've seen the movie.
Yeah, but watch it.
Serenity?
Think about Serenity, right? Watch the TV show, then watch the movie and think about the last 3 years of your life.
Oh my gosh. Right. Well, hey man, I didn't think we were going to be talking sci-fi tonight. We could go on for like another 3 hours just talking about. We didn't even about Battlestar Galactica, man. But we haven't even talked about ContentSafe.
No,
and we've done over an hour. Tell us about ContentSafe.
Well, ContentSafe is my Sistine Chapel. I've been developing software since I was 13 years old, and I'm 52 going on 53. ContentSafe is my contribution to the content creation world. We are a automated system for distributing video and audio. We deal with the new platforms like BitChute and Odyssey and Rumble, though we are going to be writing things for the more mainstream platforms as well, like Facebook and Twitter. We also do distribution on audio to using, presently we use Buzzsprout. I don't know if you know Buzzsprout. Mm-hmm. It's a good tool for distributing video. We are here to get people out there to these new audiences, as well as protect people from censorship. So the way our system works is we will monitor automatically a channel, and whenever a new video is published, we download it, and then we automatically upload it to the other platforms. That's in the nutshell what ContentSafe is. But we're also a consultation company. We work with content creators to help them monetize their channels, as well as deal with censorship and other technological issues they might have.
And don't you also host the content as well?
We can.
You can.
Though we're not a video platform. If we're going to host video, what we're going to encourage people to host it on is Interplanetary File System, which is an open source content distribution network. It's right now the only community-owned content distribution service. So no one entity owns IPFS. It's owned by the world.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Well, we have loads of YouTubers and podcasters who listen to us, so it might be something to bear in mind. You know, if you're making videos that are controversial, maybe like us, you've had the odd YouTube strike here and there, and you're concerned about, you know, being able to keep doing what you're doing. It's something to bear in mind, to consider looking into. I'll put the website in the show notes if anyone wants to follow up on that.
It's also a time saver, because a lot of people would be on BitChute, but they don't want to deal with the problems of uploading to BitChute. Yeah.
Yeah, and multiple platforms, because, you know, you want to get your stuff, you know, to as many eyeballs and ears as you can. And it's labor intensive, and it's just a drag as well, manually uploading to all these different sites. It's like I have Odyssey, and I think I'm like 3 months behind on uploading to Odyssey, because it's just another job and it's boring, and I tend to forget, you know.
Well, one of my new clients just handed me 500 videos to upload to BitChute.
Wow, 500.
Yeah, and the problem with BitChute, I love them. They're the pioneer in the new platforms, but they have a lot of problems with their software. And they have a lot of problems with keeping enough disk space to store all their videos. Right. So uploading to them, I've had many a client say, I dropped BitChute because I just got frustrated with how difficult it was to upload to.
Yeah, you'd be halfway through, the bar is going across, and then all of a sudden you're back to square one and you're having to reset it all again. That's before, you know, regardless of having to copy and paste your descriptions and your titles and your thumbnails and all the rest of it. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, they've got some gremlins, haven't they, to figure out. Yeah. But I think it's a great platform, really. It gets given a hard time, and you know, we've had some pretty horrific comments on our videos, like because they don't censor anything, including comments. And so, that attracts people who will write really horrible things about people or different groups of people. And, but you got to take the rough with the smooth, man. If you want freedom, you've got to be able to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't put much weight on comments. Though it is nice if they're complimentary. Oh, but real quick, Battlestar Galactica. I've watched both the original Battlestar Galactica in the 1980s and the more recent one in the 2000s. The old one was so campy. It was crazy. But you know what? I was a kid. I loved it whenever I was a kid. I look back at it now and I go, oh, really? I watched that? Space Cowboys. You know that was based on Bonanza, the cowboy show? Bonanza?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah. It was Space Bonanza because Adama in the original Battlestar Galactica was also the star of the show Bonanza.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So people call it Space Bonanza. The 2000s version was slick.
Yeah.
I know that myself, I got a little frustrated with it because at that time I was getting too much terror this, terror that. I felt terrored out. And whenever I started seeing them portray this as acts of terrorism with the humans and the Cylons, I'm like, really? Are we going to have to watch another TV show like 24 now? Is that what we're going to want? What we're going to be forced to watch here? So I kind of gave up on the show after that. But I do know that the ending was pretty intriguing, and I think it was a brilliant retelling of the story.
Yeah, there was a deeper layer of sort of esotericism going on, running through the show, which you don't really see in sci-fi, or I haven't seen much of in sci-fi. The whole sort of the Zodiac. It was almost like a 12 Tribes of Israel kind of theme going through it. It was incredibly creative, the way they did it.
Well, and if you think about even the original. Had an aspect of it where Earth was Battlestar Galactica's ultimate destination, and that we are the children of the people who left, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same thing, but you got that layer of the AI and the Cylon in there that they're still watching us.
Yeah. They brought it into the modern age.
And then there's also the aspect that really the difference between the AI and the human was blurred, and that we were one and the same.
Well, yeah, there's that uncanny valley, this sort of thing that we're going to witness probably over the next decade or two, this sort of blurring of the lines between reality and virtual reality. It's a very strange world we're going into that our kids are going to find themselves into. And I think there will be a backlash, I'm hoping, and people are going to strive for authenticity and real human contact. And as great as Zoom is and video conferencing, and, Zuckerberg's talking about the Meta, Gates, he's implementing this into Teams, like there'll be this virtual VR conferencing. Yeah, keep all that shit. I'm not really interested in that. It's human connections what's important.
Oh, absolutely.
Not the medium.
I do think that what we might be experiencing right now is kind of a pit stop between major epochs. And the connectivity of the internet has been essential in kind of getting everybody synchronized on the same program. Before the internet, you could not even dream of doing that. Getting everybody synchronized that, okay, this is what the world's going to become. And depending on how dark or light you want to take this, it can go either direction. It can be that we become the slave class, or it could be that we enter something just amazing that is totally unlike anything else we've experienced in human history.
I prefer that one. I think we should end on that positive note. Yeah, the breaker of chains. It's going to unshackle us, and we can go into this new epoch with optimism and try and take advantage of all these positive effects that technology can give us. And we'll leave Ray Kurzweil and the singularity and all that stuff to one side and try not to worry about it.
Just a historical footnote, a crazy idea.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, we could go on, as I said, we could go on for hours. We could talk about the singularity and AI and all that. But we've got to get on with our lives. So,
well, if you ever need another filler episode, you can invite me again.
Absolutely. We should definitely do this again. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And
likewise.
We can talk sci-fi and AI all night, I guess.
Maybe music sometime.
Yeah. Do you play?
I used to whenever I was a kid, before I got into the sciences, but mostly listen now. And I'm a metalhead.
Oh, yeah. Wow. What? Are we talking Megadeth, Metallica, or harder?
That's old school stuff, which I did do whenever I was younger. But now it's like Swedish dark metal stuff. Yeah.
Gore.
A little bit.
Those guys are nuts. I like the costumes.
Yeah, Slipknot was my big thing in the 2000s, and I've moved on to, like Cannibal Corpse and other groups like that.
Cool. Right. Well, you heard it there, eavesdroppers. Links to ContentSafe in the show notes if you want to follow up on Matt's stuff. It's been a pleasure, as I said, Matt. I'll play us out now, and let's hang on the line for 1 minute, and we'll catch you guys next week with another podcast. So look after yourselves and each other. Ta-ra.